Everything was just as Twilight remembered it. The dark oaken walls had been sculpted by powerful magics, creating a living structure perfectly suited for work as a library and a house. Her eyes ran over the bright covers of her beloved books that decorated the walls, each one in immaculate shape. The air was rich with the heavy scent of paper and books, ink and parchment, learning and life. Beneath them all were the more subtle accents, the reminder of last night's dinner and the familiar odor of a well-cared-for home. Everything was perfect. Absolutely perfect. The sights, the smells. Everything was as she remembered. Even the same patches of dust Spike never quite managed to deal with lay undisturbed atop the highest shelves. It was her home, just as it was in her memories. I'm home. I'm home, I'm home, I'm home, I'm home, Twilight repeated rapidly under her breath. She clutched her sheet tightly to her chest, her breathing growing ragged as she tried to keep from hyperventilating. The warm and gentle caress of the morning sunlight did nothing to fight off the tendrils of ice sliding up her neck. Her frightened eyes danced erratically around the room. She shivered. I'm home. I'm not at the hospital anymore. Why am I home? This can't be real. Am I free? What happened? Her thoughts raced around her head like a carousel spinning out of control. She struggled to make sense of them all, trying to bring order to chaos, but the questions soon blurred together into a single impenetrable mess of mental confusion. Beneath them all, a single word throbbed, with a heartbeat of its own. How? Twilight had always considered herself a scientist. Reason and logic were ideas that she could draw comfort from. They offered reasonable explanations from how the world operated, creating meaning from what otherwise would be anarchy. While others saw the unknown as an impassable wall, she saw the unanswered questions as gateways to further understanding. Every time she dove into a new magical tome, she was helping to pave the way for further discoveries. Most ponies misunderstood Twilight's scholarly ambitions and assumed she was just a student of magic. It was a common misconception. Magic was the arcane lifeblood of the natural world, but it was only one small aspect of the wider universe. To claim Twilight just studied magic was to claim a painter just studied brushes, or a baker just studied flour. She examined it all, for to properly understand the arcane, she needed to master what it is woven into. Uniting the two brought clarity, revealing the rules and laws that bound everything together. Which is why Twilight Sparkle, chosen student of Princess Celestia, bearer of the element of magic, was frightened by her own home. The rules had been broken. She shouldn't be back in Ponyville. She couldn't be back in Ponyville. Natural law could never be broken. They were inalienable, inviolable, and unchanging. Even Discord had never actually broken the rules. He had subverted them with powerful magics. The ideals of logic and reason that she cherished so much dictated that her presence in Ponyville should be impossible. Twilight found herself floundering as she sought an explanation. Her thoughts were slow and hazy. She turned her head to examine her surroundings, as she had a dozen times before, searching for some clue that she must have missed. There has to be something here. Everything has a logical answer. Just because I don't have one now doesn't prove there isn't one to be found. She ignored the fog that had settled over her mind as she began running through possible explanations, considering any illness or curse she could think of, and applying it to her situation. When those failed, the theories she had crafted while back in the hospital were dragged back up to be examined once again, all in the name of due diligence. Even the foes she had defeated over the years were judged, each unlikely candidate discarded as being incompatible with what she knew. Her frustration surpassed fear as the logical solution continued to elude her. Desperate to find reason somewhere, the theories grew more complex, rapidly spiraling into the absurd. It was only when she realized that she was seriously pondering the likelihood of changelings utilizing the stolen elements of harmony to bring about the return of Nightmare Moon did Twilight accept the futility of her activities. She groaned in defeat. I can't. There isn't an explanation for any of this. Why is this happening to me? Twilight demanded, daring the world to answer her. Silence mocked her. She buried her face in her hooves, her voice dropping to a hoarse whisper. Nothing makes sense anymore. It's like I'm stuck in a nightmare that just won't end. She froze. A nightmare, she repeated, lifting her head as a revelation dawned on her. Twilight's fears began to drain away, taking with them the host of ludicrously over-engineered theories that she had been trying to justify. Of course! Hawkman's razor! In lieu of any evidence to the contrary, the simplest answer with the fewest assumptions should be accepted. This is all a dream! Her face split into a lazy grin. Oh, wait. Oh, yes! The hospital has to be the dream! What's a simpler answer? That I had one nightmare, or that all my memories are just fantasies? This has to be real. It's the only answer that makes any sense. Which means I'm home! Twilight leapt from her bed with an undignified cry of relief, which was quickly followed by an even more undignified and equally uncoordinated dance of joy. I'm home! Oh, Celestia, I'm really home! Twilight, are you back already? Twilight stumbled. Unbalanced by her awkward movements, she barely had time to shout before slamming into the nearest bookshelf and collapsing. Dislodged by the impact, books began raining down upon her, each thump eliciting a soft "Uff" from the stunned unicorn. Twilight! The voice called again as the soft click of claws upon wooden floors drew closer. Shrugging off her encyclopedia sarcophagus, Twilight lifted herself up on unsteady hooves. Her body hurt, her head was ringing, and everything swayed like a ship in a storm, but Twilight's smile stretched from ear to ear. The moment a purple and green blur entered her fluctuating field of vision, she lunged forward with all the grace and coordination of a drunkard slipping on a patch of ice. Beating the odds, she managed to connect with her intended target. Spike! She shouted as she tackled the surprised dragon. The awkward landing was certainly going to leave a bruise, but she didn't care. Twilight! Spike gasped, his warm scales grinding into her fur as she caught him in a massive hug. What's gotten into you? She ignored his attempts to free himself, squeezing him even tighter. Oh, Spike, you don't know how much I've missed you. Spike blushed as his adopted big sister nuzzled him, increasing his squirming. Come on, that's enough. This is getting embarrassing, he protested weakly. She responded by crushing him into her coat. I was so worried, and I didn't know what happened. And I was so afraid that I'd never see you again, and... It's squeezing a little tight, Twilight. I was so scared. Everything was wrong, and I didn't know what was real. They just... Twilight. Trouble. Breathing. Kept telling me my whole life was supposed to be a lie. They were saying I made it all up, and... Twilight! Spike shouted hard enough to send a tuft of dragon fire shooting into the air, narrowly missing Twilight's mane. Her grip slackened as she jerked back from the bright flash of green heat, allowing Spike to finally free himself with an audible pop. He tried to give her a stern look as he gasped for air, although it was clearly evident he was playing up his discomfort. I love you too, Twilight. But seriously, can we avoid the big death hugs in the future? I'm sorry, but I was so relieved to see you. I just couldn't help myself. She apologized happily, beaming down at him. I had this absolutely terrifying nightmare. You don't know how relieved I am to see you. It's good to be home. Spike brushed some purple hairs from his scales as he looked over at her, concern replacing annoyance once she relieved the sheer sincerity of Twilight's voice. Wow, it must have been a pretty bad nightmare. The absolute worst! He tapped a claw against his chin thoughtfully. Was it the one where you forgot to send a letter to the princess? What? No, of course not. Fail a test? No. Show up late to class? Forget an overdue library book? Break a pinky promise? No, none of those. So it was... Spike's eyes widened. Oh, Twilight, I'm so sorry. He placed a hand on her shoulder. You haven't had the magic kindergarten nightmare for months. I didn't know. It wasn't anything I'd ever had before, she declared, unable to decide if she was more disturbed by the long list of nightmares she had endured over the years, or the ease in which Spike had been able to run through them all off the top of his head. It was new. I was in this hospital, and... Her voice trailed off again, as Spike watched her expectantly. You know what? It's not important. It's over now. He shrugged. Okay, whatever you say. I'm a little surprised that you had time to fall asleep again. I swear I thought you left an hour ago. Oh well, maybe you weren't the only one dreaming stuff up. Breakfast is ready, by the way. He glanced over at the small mound of fallen books. So, I guess I should get to work putting those back while you eat? Twilight shook her head. No, I want my '1 assistant to spend more time with me right now, she told him, as she affectionately nuzzled his cheek, causing the small dragon to blush again. The mess can wait. But before we eat, I have a letter to Princess Celestia I need you to send. Really? Is it about the nightmare? Yes, it is, she said as she trotted down the stairs, making a beeline towards her writing desk. And it's urgent, too. He jogged after her. Doesn't that seem kind of odd, sending the princess a letter about a nightmare? I mean, it was just a dream. Twilight hesitated. It was just a dream, but... She frowned. Well, I can't explain it. The dream was so vivid, so real, it was unlike anything I've ever experienced before. What about that door? You know, the one back in the Crystal Empire? Asked Spike, shivering lightly at the recollection. That was pretty real. Sombra's spell was different. He used dark magic to draw out your worst fears and create mental illusions to sap your willpower and happiness. However, its power was dependent upon the victim believing in its deceptions. Once you helped free me, I could sense the energy behind the spell. I'm certain I could defeat its illusions if it happened again, she explained, with firm resolve. Twilight gave him a warm smile. Plus, it doesn't work so well if you have good friends around who care for you. I doubt the world's greatest assistant would leave me stuck in some dark spell for too long. Well, I am pretty awesome, he said, as he puffed out his chest. So, if this was just a nightmare, then why bother Princess Celestia about it? She sighed. It might be foolish, and I'm probably just rattled after waking up so suddenly, but I need to send her a message, just in case. Just in case of what? Just in case it wasn't a dream, she thought to herself. Just in case there is something else I haven't thought of. Better safe than sorry, after all. Standing before her desk, Twilight levitated over a blank scroll and lay it out before her, savoring the sensation of using magic once again. It felt odd, after being cut off from her natural unicorn abilities for so long. Of course, Rainbow Dash always says the same thing about flying whenever she's grounded. You don't miss it until it's not there. Dipping a quill in some ink, Twilight began addressing her letter with her usual precision. And she's right. It does come back quickly. It's just something you never forget. Spike watched her as she set about writing the letter to Princess Celestia. Twilight worked fast, keeping her letter short and succinct. She was eager to send the message as soon as possible. She didn't want to admit it, to Spike or herself, but she was still afraid. Everything suggested she was back home. The logical explanation of a nightmare fit with all the facts. There was nothing to suggest she should still be concerned. The doubt remained, a stubborn stain on her mind that couldn't be scrubbed away. Finished, she declared, as she dropped the quill into its container. Rolling up the scroll, she floated it to Spike, who carefully plucked it out of the air. The letter vanished in a flash of green flame, taking with it the heavy concerns that had weighed upon her mind. There we go. Now we just have to wait until we get a response. Although she knew her fears were irrational, she certainly felt reassured, knowing she had sent the letter. If I'm right, then later today I'll just end up dealing with a slightly confused Princess Celestia. If I'm wrong... Twilight shook her head, halting the thought. No, don't think about that. You're not wrong. If you're all done, then I guess that means it's time for breakfast, Spike said. He caught Twilight's stare. What? I'm hungry. Besides, it's not like we need to stand around waiting right here. We can wait in the kitchen, with the food. Twilight grinned. You make a valid argument, she said. She ignored the sliver of doubt embedded in the back of her thoughts as the pair of them walked towards the kitchen. She wasn't going to let her fears ruin her good mood. You know, I've been saving up a few gems for a special occasion. I think you deserve a little treat. With a cry of excitement, Spike raced ahead, licking his lips eagerly. She laughed. It's good to be home. The library door swung open behind her. Spike, I'm home, a familiar voice called out.
Everything stopped. The world was a still life, painted with confusion and disbelief.
That voice. No, it's impossible, thought Twilight, as she stared blankly ahead, through eyes wide with shock.
Unable to blink, unable to move, she could only watch as Spike slowly turned around, his face racked with confusion. He glanced behind Twilight and jerked back, his eyes shooting open as wide as her own.
Oh, it seems we have a guest. The soft clip-clop of hooves on wood drew closer. The voice's owner was right behind her, but Twilight remained locked rigidly in place. Spike, my friends are coming over later. Can you get some tea started? Oh, and bring us 2 mugs when you can. I need to have a chat with our visitor. Spike glanced between Twilight and the other pony. Silently, she begged him not to leave. She didn't want to be left alone with the unseen mare. Sure, he finally replied, his eyes continuing to dart between the 2 mares. Slowly, he tiptoed backwards, reaching out behind him as he kept them both in his sights. I'll be right back. Spike disappeared into the kitchen, leaving Twilight to face the mare and her terrible voice. The other pony exhaled softly. Well now, this is a quandary. You see, you're not supposed to be here. This place isn't for you, and you know it too. At the back of your mind, you've been bothered by something you can't quite place your hoof on. Just your mere presence here is a problem. What do you mean? Twilight croaked. Her mouth was a desiccated wasteland, the lack of moisture making each syllable sting as if it were extracted from her dry lips. You know what I mean, the voice said as she circled around Twilight. Ponyville is a lovely town. It's filled with caring ponies who live happy and productive lives. Families raise their children here. Young lovers stroll together in the park. There are fairs and festivals and contests for every season. It is certainly not the sort of community that can tolerate the dangerously insane deciding to muck it up. I'm not insane, said Twilight defensively, cold reminders of her nightmare coming back to chill her bones. And I'm certainly not dangerous. She continued to stare ahead, her body still ignoring any command to move. The voice laughed. Oh, really? There is a problem with your assertion, although you don't want to face it. You are insane. You're just denying it. Twilight mustered what was left of her courage, fighting to keep from drowning in the rising waters of apprehension and fear. Prove it. Are you sure you want me to do that? The invisible female offered. You could just close your eyes and leave right now. Wouldn't you feel better if you just didn't have to deal with the pain of being proven wrong? Prove it, she repeated firmly. Honestly, you don't have to do this. It's not going to be pleasant. It's going to hurt the more you fight it. I said prove it! The other mare sighed. Well, if you insist. Despite her best attempts to deny it, Twilight had known what was coming. The familiar voice, Spike's reaction, the nagging doubts that had lingered at the back of her mind since she had woken up. She had put the pieces together. Everything had added up to a terrible answer she didn't want to face. But as the other mare trotted into view and halted directly ahead of her, she couldn't avoid it any longer. Twilight was looking at herself. She trembled, her locked joints unable to keep her body from shivering in fear. It was a reflection without a mirror. Her copy stood before her, an insincere look of sympathy etched upon her violet face. "I told you this would be painful," the other Twilight said, in her stolid voice. Twilight stared back, unable to voice a response. Inside her frigid chest, her heart beat erratically, unable to decide if it wanted to go into a fit of hyperactivity or just freeze up like the rest of her. The shadows within the library deepened, despite the morning sunlight blazing through the windows, adding a sinister edge to the familiar world. "I know you don't want to face the truth, but you can't keep deluding yourself like this. It's just not healthy. You're hurting yourself by holding on to your delusions." The other Twilight affected a concerned appearance. "This is my life, not yours. I'm Princess Celestia's prize pupil. I bear the element of magic. It was my friends and I who defeated Nightmare Moon, stopped Discord, halted the Changeling invasion, and saved the Crystal Empire. You're not supposed to be here. This world isn't for you." Twilight tried to speak, to deny her reflection's ludicrous charges, but her tongue was as frozen as the rest of her. "I am Twilight Sparkle," her duplicate declared firmly. She edged closer, lowering her voice. "And you? What have you done? You've tried to steal my life, copy my accomplishments, and take credit for that which you didn't do." "No," whispered Twilight, in a pale echo of her twin's confident tone. The imposter's eyes narrowed as some of the false sympathy leaked from her face. "No." "No," she repeated, a little louder. The other Twilight leaned back again, dark amusement twinkling in her violet eyes. "You're right, actually. You have done something else. Something that I haven't done. You've hurt ponies. This is your accomplishment. It's too bad you're in denial about that as well." "Liar," the reflection smirked. "See? Denial. But then, if I was you, I wouldn't want to remember how much I hurt other ponies either." Slowly, she began to circle Twilight, like a shark around a wounded fish, slipping out of sight from the still frozen mare. "You see, that's why you want to be me. I'm a hero. I'm a good friend. I'm always doing my best to help others. You just cause pain," she whispered directly into Twilight's ear. The unicorn would have jumped if she still wasn't rooted to the spot. The other mare chuckled as she resumed her slow trot. "It's an easy theory to prove, after all. Just look at how much you are hurting yourself by trying to believe in your protective delusions. But then, I can understand why you would do such a thing. You hurt yourself with your delusions, so you can avoid the real pain of remembering. I can't blame you for that," she continued, as she casually finished her circuit, halting herself in front of Twilight once again. "I'd make the same choice if I were in your hooves. It hurts less, giving yourself over to the fantasies of living another pony's life. The pain of loss is so much more tolerable than the agony of guilt and shame." Her expression hardened. "But that doesn't change the fact that you don't belong here. This place isn't for a pony that brings suffering wherever she goes, which is what you do. It's about all you do, really." "You're a liar," Twilight repeated, feeling her anger rising to the force. "Memories? Pain? Whose memories? Who is hurt?" Her thoughts were caught in a whirlpool, the impostor's words creating a storm of turmoil that threatened to drown her mind beneath the waves of conflicting emotions. Twilight grit her teeth as she continued, taking deliberate care with every word. I don't hurt other ponies. I don't cause suffering. Who's the liar now? Her duplicate said with a cruel laugh. I am struggling to think of anyone in your life you've ever actually helped. This world is one created for ponies who love and cherish each other. You're just a selfish and deluded little monster. Twilight's retort was interrupted by Spike's return, a steaming mug clenched in each hand. The pungent smell of herbal tea wafted through the air. It was her favorite blend, bringing back memories of long hours spent working at Princess Celestia's side. The thought of her mentor's kind face brought a calming touch to her troubled mind, as she bit back her rage. Don't lose control. You're better than that. She is just trying to get you upset. The dragon almost stumbled when he glanced up to find the two mares staring at him with intense expressions. He blinked. Tea? He managed to offer with a weak smile. Excellent. Good job, Spike, the other Twilight said kindly. What would I do without my #1 assistant? Spike gave her a nervous smile as he offered her one of the mugs, looking at Twilight from the corner of his eyes. Oh, it was nothing, he said, trying to mask his uncertainty in the presence of the identical unicorns. Twilight flashed her impostor an angry glare as she accepted the cup from Spike. How dare you talk to Spike like you know him? I raised him. He is my assistant. Spike turned to make his way towards Twilight, but he was halted when the mug in his hand was levitated out of his grip and floated over to her by her double. Don't worry, Spike. I'll take care of that. Now you run along and make sure there's enough for the others when they arrive. For a moment, Twilight thought he was going to protest, his mouth flapping open and shut a few times. Are you sure you don't need me? Asked Spike, as he stared at Twilight, something unreadable hidden beneath his emerald eyes. No, we'll be fine. Don't worry about us. We just have some things we need to discuss. We could have some hay fries in the icebox I could reheat, he offered, edging a little closer to Twilight. Spike, the other Twilight stated his name forcefully, pulling his attention back to her. We're fine. All we need now is a little privacy. Understood? Spike nodded meekly and hurried back to the kitchen. Twilight's loathing of her impostor reached new depths. She pawed at the floor in a subconscious display of aggression, the white-hot hate burning in her chest, melting the doubt that had frozen her muscles. She knew the princess would disapprove of her losing control of herself and resorting to violence, but that didn't make the idea of bucking her twin in the face any less delicious. That's better, the other Twilight stated, as she watched Spike's purple tail disappear around a corner. She turned back to Twilight, floating the mug closer to the scowling unicorn's head. Go on, have some tea. I know you'll like it. She took a sip from her own mug as encouragement. See, it's good. It will help calm you down. Bristling at the implication that she needed to be calmed down, Twilight telekinetically yanked the mug free from her double's mental grasp, splashing tea onto the floor. She stared daggers at her alternate as she fought to rein in her temper. How dare you speak to Spike like that? Please, don't start, she said scornfully. Twilight ignored her. How dare you speak to Spike like you know him, like you have any right to tell him what to do. Her voice was low and dangerous, like a viper coiled in the grass. Her impostor rolled her eyes. Just drink your tea, she snapped, taking a sip from her own mug. We have a lot to discuss, you and I, and it's for the best if we're all in control of our emotions. She lifted an eyebrow as she gave Twilight a cocky grin. We don't want any pony doing something crazy, now would we? Silence descended upon the two mares. Twilight's muscles continued to clench and release as she held herself back from lunging at the imposter. Stay in control. Violence won't solve anything. She is just trying to get a rise out of you so she can make a point. Prove her wrong. Lifting her mug to her lips and resisting the urge to hurl the steaming contents into the other mare's smug face, she took a reluctant sip. The familiar taste washed over her tongue, bringing with it some of the fondest memories of her life. As much as she wanted to, she couldn't deny the tea was soothing. But I still hate her, she added firmly, her steely gaze burrowing into her opposite's eyes. She continued to sip her drink, content to let the awkward quiet continue indefinitely. Twilight considered it a minor victory when her impostor was the first to break the silence. Clearing her throat, the other Twilight began speaking. Yes, so, I know you're probably very confused right now, and probably pretty angry, but you need to understand something. This life, she gestured at the library, is mine. I'm Twilight Sparkle. I have friends I adore, and they love me back. We would do anything for each other, and that means dealing with threats. And you are most certainly a threat. Twilight scowled. They are my friends, not yours. You're just some pony, something that has taken what is mine and twisted it around, claiming that I'm the thief. I've seen through your illusions, and with my help, my friends will see through them too, said Twilight with a strong grin. It's good to hear you sounding so confident, the other Twilight mused. My friends will be here shortly, so you'll have an opportunity to show us all. I'll prove it then, Twilight said, before taking another sip, trying to match her reflection's unconcerned attitude. After all, they're my friends. The impostor snorted into her tea. If that were the case, then why do you seem so determined to hurt them? A real friend wouldn't just selfishly use the other pony, leaving them in pain and tears. I don't do that, she snapped, the bonds holding back her temper, growing frayed and worn. I don't go around hurting other ponies either. I care about my friends. I would never hurt them. Never. The other mare laughed, arrogance and savage amusement transforming Twilight's voice into something completely alien. Please, you can't honestly believe that. Don't you remember what you did to Pinkie Pie? Twilight flinched at her friend's name, eliciting another round of cruel laughter. She glared at her tormentor, hiding her doubt and shame behind a mask of bitter anger. She had hurt Pinkie Pie, but that didn't make her some uncaring beast. She narrowed her eyes. That life isn't real. It's an illusion, a fantasy. This is my real life. Her voice dropped to a whisper. And I want it back. I won't let you steal what is mine and get away with it. You're the one trying to steal the lives of others, said the other Twilight. You would rather take on the life you didn't live than face the shame and guilt of what you've done in your own. You're like a tornado, leaving nothing but loss and devastation in your wake. Your friends, your family, and even total strangers who just happened to get in the way. No pony is safe around you. Stop lying! Twilight shouted as she took a threatening step towards her. That's all you do. Lie! Lie and try to mess with my head. Everything you're saying now is just meant to confuse me and distract me. I'm not going to fall for it again. She jabbed an accusatory hoof at her twin. I've dealt with you before. It was you in the bathroom mirror. You were there to destroy my willpower, to try and convince me that I was insane. So I would just give up and accept the prison you've created for me. Well, it didn't work. I'm still here, and I'm going to defeat you. The other Twilight sighed. I'm frankly disappointed with you. I hoped that you would possess the mental acuity to realize when you're being irrational and senseless. I thought if we talked, you might accept the inevitable and give up on your delusions. But it seems you are too stubborn to see the truth. There is nothing irrational about this, she growled. The evidence is there, in my mind, and in my senses. I'm not being stubborn. I'm standing up for the truth. I'm standing up against you. Twilight stumbled slightly, but corrected herself, forcing herself to take another aggressive step forwards. You are not going to win. Once my friends arrive, once the elements of harmony are here, We will show you just how powerful true friendship is. The lack of any worry on her imposter's face only heightened Twilight's anger. You are just setting yourself up for more disappointment, she told Twilight, a whisper of amusement sparkling in her eyes. But then, it is for the best. Your delusions are not healthy for any pony. You need to accept that this life isn't yours. It won't be pleasant, but you need a voice you trust to tell you that you're sick. She gestured past Twilight. So why don't we ask my friends what they believe? Twilight glanced back over her shoulder. As if on cue, the door to the library swung open, revealing 5 familiar mares. She sighed with relief as they strode into the library, their mere appearance enough to bolster her confidence. These were her friends, she remembered. Now you're in for it, she told her doppelganger, giving the other unicorn a bold smirk before turning back to her friends. Words of greeting died on her tongue as her best friends drew up in a loose semicircle around her. There was recognition in their gaze, but the warm compassion she had been expecting was painfully absent. Instead of friendship, there was anger, embarrassment, and disgust. 5 sets of cold eyes judged Twilight, sapping her courage and leaving her speechless. Is this here imposter still giving you trouble, Sugar Plum? Asked Applejack. Yes. Both Twilights answered as one. I wasn't talking to you, she snapped at Twilight. Didn't you learn better than to hang around Ponyville? Interjected Rainbow Dash as she hovered just off the ground, staring at Twilight like she was something the Pegasus needed to scrape off her hoof. Seriously, what is your problem? We told you, you're not welcome around here. What, do you need us to make you leave? Huh? She flew a little closer to Twilight, her forelegs raised in an aggressive display. But it's me, Twilight Sparkle, she said, as ice formed in the pit of her stomach. She gestured desperately at the other mare. She's the imposter! I'm your friend! No pony likes a fibber, said Pinkie Pie with a reproachful look. Don't be absurd, you little monster. How dare you impugn the character of our good friend by claiming to be her? Rarity lifted her snout dismissively. It's disgraceful, having some mad mare spreading such slander in public. Applejack nodded. It's just straight-up dishonesty, that's what it is. We don't want you here. This isn't your home. You've worn out your welcome. Twilight slowly backed away from the approaching ponies, wincing with every cutting declaration. The empty teacup tumbled to the floor as she struggled to speak. But please, you can't. But why don't you believe me? She stammered, her frightened eyes darting from one face to another, seeking a hint of affection in her friend's eyes. There was nothing. Fluttershy! Twilight nearly shouted, focusing her watery gaze on the one mare that hadn't said anything yet. Unlike the anger on the faces of the others, the shy Pegasus just looked nervous and uncomfortable. Desperate hope flared up within Twilight's chest. Please, Fluttershy, say that you know it's me. Please, say that you recognize me. Fluttershy averted her eyes, doing her best to hide her face behind her pink mane. I think, she whispered softly, nibbling her lower lip. I think you should stop trying to pretend you're, some pony you're not. It's not very nice. No, not you two. Please, Fluttershy, not you. You're just ill and, need some help to get better. No. Twilight shook her head, her cheeks glistening with her tears. The loud and angry denouncements from her other friends had been hard blows against her confidence, each one landing with a nearly physical impact that left her reeling. Fluttershy's soft rebuttal was a jagged knife, plunged straight into her breast. Her hope was snuffed out like a candle, leaving nothing to hold back the darkness within that threatened to consume her. She felt like she was being crushed down against the wooden floor as the other ponies continued to force her backwards, her world shrinking down around her. She spun to face her imposter, her tear-stricken face gnarled and twisted with rage. You! This is all your fault!
You're twisting their minds! You're controlling them somehow. Like... Her wet eyes widened in realization. Like when Cadence had been replaced with a changeling. The other Twilight groaned. Alright, I'll admit that it was funny at first listening to you try and rationalize your delusions, but now it's just pathetic. Stop embarrassing me in front of my friends. They're my friends! Twilight howled, her horn bursting into life. I've had enough of your lies! This ends now! She ignored the fear on her friends' faces as they shied away from her purple aura. Her attention focused on her twin, sitting yards away. The arcane power washed away the chill of doubt like a warm bath as she set about forming the complex spell. A lesser image would find it challenging. For Twilight, it was almost second nature. She had practiced it furiously after her brother's wedding, knowing that one day she might need to utilize it. She narrowed her eyes, dangerously. I know that you are... Changeling! A beam of lavender fire danced from the tip of her horn and engulfed her tormentor. A second sun was born in the middle of the library, the blinding flash of its fleeting existence accompanied by a thunderclap strong enough to shake the foundations of the library. Twilight struggled to remain standing in the aftermath as the tremors sent books sailing through the air. She grinned as she furiously blinked away the spots dancing in her vision, eager to see her handiwork. Okay, that was a little more powerful than I had intended, she admitted, letting out a giddy laugh. But it's fine. Now my friends will know the truth. Still sporting a broad smile, she turned her attention to the other mares, impatient to see the look of realization on their faces once they understood that she had once again saved them from a changeling infiltrator. Her smile slipped away when she got sight of them all, each one in a state of disarray and confusion. My stars! hollered Applejack as she rubbed her eyes. I can hardly see. The farm pony blindly groped about around her, attempting to locate the hat that had been blown off her head. Fluttershy helped Rainbow Dash up from the floor, fussing over a large bump on her head. The prismatic mare reassured her that she was fine, giving Twilight a venomous glare. Reluctantly, Fluttershy left Dash's side and turned her attention to the whimpering Pinkie Pie, who lay where she had fallen, her hooves protectively wrapped over her eyes. Twilight gulped, her dread returning with a wave of dizziness. Guilt began gnawing at her heart, but she pushed her doubts aside. I'll apologize afterwards. They'll understand. It had to be done. Ignoring their dirty looks, she gestured at where her imposter had been standing. See? I told you, she wasn't... She stiffened, her voice trailing away, as she stared at where she was pointing. You were saying? Asked the other Twilight with a smirk.